Hello, friends and others. Chris Thrall, marathon man and ex-Special Forces soldier, had me on his channel, and I think we set a record for never finding out quite what we were supposed to be talking about. If I'd taken the trouble to watch it through at some time, other than through a warm fuzz of alcohol, I could tell you what we discussed. But I'm busy, lazy, and easily distracted, so I didn't. Let's settle in together, allowing a warm fuzz to watch this so we will both know what it was about. Chris Thrall, ladies and gentlemen. What does he produce?
Oh, he's done two incredible films now. The first one was called The Diary of a Disgraced Soldier.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He was the gentleman that was in Iraq filming what looked to be some untoward beatings of Iraqi civilians.
Yeah.
And then when he told his story through this documentary, you suddenly learned a completely different side to what the mainstream media had put out. And namely that it wasn't some unwarranted slapping around of these civilians. They'd been under attack for days and days upon end. They'd been shot at, they'd been had grenades thrown over into their compound, and they faced this angry mob for days on end, and finally their riot squad ran out and managed to,
Right, I understand that. I wonder why the people were attacking them, just because they didn't like, Westerners in their country, or it's hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah, these things turn, don't they? They often turn. They start off with the West being welcomed in, and then when they find out that the West's intentions, or George Bush's intentions, and all the cronies that own him, then
Listen, I just thought, since we're just starting off, I should say hello to everybody. Hello, everybody. And I'm with Chris Thrall, who has kindly allowed me into his map room. I can see you're plotting your campaigns for the war in the East behind you.
Yes.
And you've probably seen me before on this program. And and I'm well known for blundering my way through a smuggling career of 40 years and being jailed in various hideous places from which I escaped or otherwise wriggled out. So I'm alive today. And we had a good time last time we spoke, didn't we?
We had an absolutely wonderful chat, David, and it's always nice or rewarding to meet someone who's been out there a bit and done a few things.
I know what you mean. Sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, I'll make the wrong assumption that somebody is a little familiar with the areas that I'm talking about. Whereas I know with you, certainly, with your, what would you call it, wild rides up and down in a series of ongoing highs and lows, that a lot of things are familiar to you, that it makes things easier. I tell you what, I did want your opinion on this. You've probably seen the story over the last year or so of, now what would you call him? His name was Carlos Ghosn, hard to pronounce because it's spelled Ghosn or something. Anyway, he was the boss of Nissan Mitsubishi, having come from Renault. Very high-flying executive, not just well-paid, but well-respected, having brought Renault from the brink of bankruptcy. Anyway, he was arrested in Japan by Japanese authorities over his personal finances and how he used the money from the company. Oh, fine. A bit puzzling why they got involved. But he was held in a Japanese prison. And as you know, that is not a fun ride in there. Okay, there's nothing so bad about a mat on the ground, is there, Chris? I mean, it's actually quite good for the back, But he escaped from Japan. He was bailed out eventually on a 1 trillion yen bail ticket, which is kind of pricey, isn't it? And he put up Nissan shares for that, by the way. And it was a US special ex-services guy called Taylor, I think his name was, who got him out, or organized the plan anyway. And you're all familiar with the story?
I'm going to be honest, David. I stopped watching the mainstream media after, can we say, the events in New York back along.
Well, way back at 9/11.
Yeah, I think when
that's really bowing out from the mainstream. I mean, I can understand the point, but what did you? And I guess there's nothing that's happened that would make you feel otherwise. Think that the mainstream news was too manipulated, or getting top-down editorial affecting everything?
yes, I would probably hazard a guess. This is just a rough putting it out. There's probably 300 people can control what's goes on this planet.
Yeah, what's that big conference usually happens in Switzerland?
Bilderberg.
That's it. Yeah, it's spooky, isn't it? You kind of get this old-fashioned whiff of sulfur about it, where there's some dark secret cabal is going on, a kind of modern-day Illuminati, where they're I often like to think, okay, I only wish that the world was controlled by people who knew what they were doing and had the ability. Even if I didn't agree with their cunning plans, there'd be some satisfaction, don't you think, that somebody somewhere at least knew what the hell he was doing. But no, I can see how. Anyway, it was a very jumbled story, but he was taken out of Japan by private jet, but to get on it, since his house was monitored by private detectives hired by Nissan, he was concealed. He was allowed to go to the Hyatt Hotel for his meals. He went down there, got, and then was transferred into a big box. And the big box was the kind that's for concerts where they hold subwoofers, massive speakers, and then loaded onto the private jet, a Turkish company, flown to Istanbul, then on to change planes there while not clearing through immigration in Istanbul. And he already held, I think, French, Brazilian, and Lebanese passports, but I think a couple of those had been surrendered. But one thing about passports, you can always get another. The British have been actually quite good about that. I've never had them say, no, you can't have another passport. The police are holding yours. They'll knock you one out, and just say, look, if you're planning on absconding from something, don't tell us about it. People get ridiculously pally, don't they? They make eye contact with somebody and then reveal the whole plan. I don't know why that is with people. Now, so he got back there. So it's a happy ending. He's in Lebanon, but kind of everybody else got arrested. The pilots got arrested, sent to jail in Turkey for technical breach of the immigration rules. The two American Special Forces guy, well, he was really one, this Michael Taylor. He'd grown up on army bases. His adoptee dad was quite high in the military, and he was a bit of an early starter, and had a private security company in Afghanistan. Mind you, like a lot of those guys, when they were used up by the government, they turned on him. Actually did 19 months over some supposed misrepresentation of his contract. But it was better to do the plea deal, which a lot of people find. They get into a situation and some prosecutors say, well, you've already been in 9 months. We'll give you 12 months and you'll be out, in 2 or 3 months. And otherwise, you'll be bogged down in the courts for years. Who knows what we'll come up with? It'd be very tempting to plead guilty to it. But if you were tasked with getting somebody out of Japan, now you don't actually have to break him out of the prison. That's a good thing. But you've got to sneak him by. What would you be thinking? By sea, by air? What comes to mind with your experience?
I guess one thing it's getting somebody out of the country. We had this situation in Hong Kong when I was there. One of the guys I knew got busted with a big bag of ice. By ice, I don't mean diamonds. I mean crystal meth. And he was I mean, you know yourself, Dave. You don't want to spend any time in an Asian prison, let alone somewhere like China.
No, I mean, where did he get busted? It was in Hong Kong, was it?
He went to drop off a delivery, only a small. It would have been a bit of personal stuff to somebody in a bar, and they turned out to be drug squad.
Oh, great.
At this time, to show you the level of seriousness and also the kind of confused Chinese mentality, at that time they busted a kid, so a youngster in a nightclub, who had one ecstasy pill on him, as you know many people did back in the day. The judge gave him 12 years.
What, for one tab?
For one pill. At the appeal hearing, they had to explain to the judge that, you know, it's ecstasy. It's what most young people, or a significant percentage of young people, are doing at the moment. It's not, you know, it's not big. And he had his sentence reduced. But I spoke to one of my Triad friends and just said, look, can you help this guy? And the Triad sent one of their foot soldiers, a guy, I don't know how high up in the chain he was, but obviously a guy that could get stuff done. He came to meet me in a nightclub with a view to discussing how, you know, the possibility of getting this guy out the country. And the guy got so drunk he just ended up with his head on the table. And
so the plan didn't develop very well that evening.
No, it didn't. They didn't have a high, is it the word propensity for alcohol?
No. Some people are kind of, I think that's, there seems to be some genetic link there, doesn't there?
Yes, yes.
Northern European genetics seem to take it okay, but the more towards the tropics you get, the less capacity to take it on. In fact, it's, I think, really simple. When I was living in Australia, the people who were Indigenous Australians really couldn't, it just took over their lives, and ruinously so. I guess, really, you know, it's the old and yet simple thing. Whoever's left standing in the room alive has, for whatever reason, been developed to cope with whatever's around, the poisons, intoxicants, the conditions, the weather, everything else. And I'm thinking perhaps where people were in a relatively protected environment, you know, where the tropics, you don't have the extremes of weather. It's not exactly so you can pluck bananas and coconuts from the trees and don't have to do any intense farming, but you don't get exposed to a lot of different things. There's no reason for the genetic line to, you know, put up a big coping mechanism with it. But these triad, do you think, from my experience with them, they the Chinese have been more inclined to do things by underground agreement. That is, you get a passport through them, it's fixed on the computer. I was very lucky in Bangkok. I mean, you can imagine, as we know with escapes, where they fail is after the person's out more often than not. And it's just my guard dogs attacking something. I was out and then groping around the back of somebody's bathroom mirror for a promised envelope which would have the passport in it. And that was a lot of promising. You know, people promise you lots in life, don't they, Chris? Do they deliver? Rarely indeed. So I was well pleased to have the thing in my hand, but flipping through it, and then approaching the immigration desk, I thought, well, I know here that this was a British passport, freshly stolen about 3 weeks ago, I guess. My picture in it. But it had the little slip of paper that in those days you got when you went into the country. I thought, well, gee, if this is not on the computer that I see this guy tapping everybody through, I'm screwed. Did my Chinese underground friends take the trouble to go down and talk to the guy who does their fixes at the airport, open up the computer, bang it in as a genuine entry into the country? And of course, by the time I'm actually standing in front of him, I've convinced myself this is wildly improbable that they would have gone to this extra mile. So I was a bit glazed over and didn't like the furrowed brow on his head as he clicked another couple of keys. And as I stopped breathing, luckily, the stamp of freedom was applied to the passport, and I went on. The Chinese are, in my experience, have always been very reliable once you kind of penetrate that barrier. And I guess we have to make ourselves useful to people, don't we? You know, if you and I go someplace, say we head off to, I don't know, someplace which is fraught with peril, like Iran or something, and we've got some pretext for being there, which I don't know what would be. But to survive, we have to make ourselves more useful, alive, breathing, and functioning than left open to be used as a pawn. Because I think, and from what I've read from your books, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody has decided that, I think who shapes up for this fall? Chris will work its way in there. We just colour the story around the edges, and he'll be a drowning man within minutes. And that's the thing. If you don't, on balance, make yourself more useful doing what you do, then you're at terrible risk, don't you think?
Asia is incredibly efficient, right?
Mm.
It reminded me of a story. I was in, was I in Thailand? Yeah, I traveled from Thailand into Cambodia,
Right.
and I wanted to go up into Laos.
Mm.
And when I got over the border into Cambodia, I'm not sure if it's Phnom Penh.
Yeah, that's the capital.
Where no, it was a town
in Cambodia. I mean,
yeah, it was one of the first towns you get to. I can't Siem Reap.
Oh yes, that's
where
right.
they have
the
magnificent monument.
Yeah.
And I went into the travel agent and I said, "Can I get a visa for Laos?"
Right.
And I was going to travel through Laos or Vietnam, and I was going to travel up through Vietnam into Laos and then back.
What year are we talking about here?
This
roughly?
is about 15 years ago now, something like that. And I handed my passport to the girl in the travel agent, and I got on the bus and I crossed the border. I got on the bus from Siem Reap to go to Phnom Penh, or the pickup truck or whatever it was. And then it suddenly occurred to me, I hadn't given them a photograph for the visa. I just completely forgot. And so I sat on this journey, panicking as you do, because I had to get into Laos. I think I had an outbound ticket back from Bangkok in a few days' time, whatever. I had to make this trip.
But can I ask, this visa would have been either a stamp in your passport or a separate piece of paper or on a
like
computer somewhere?
when they clip the paper into your passport.
Okay. So it was there, was it? But there was no picture on it.
Well, here's the thing. I got to Phnom Penh, and when you travel, and I don't need to tell you this, these little things that you really can get worried are going to screw I mean, I've got I'm going into Vietnam. I've got all this stuff planned, and anyway, I walked into the travel agent in Phnom Penh, and as I put my hand on the door handle, and there's a glass door like they have over there, I saw the girl at a back desk go, and she reached in a drawer immediately, and even by the time I'd got in the door, she had her passport and was waving it at me.
All right.
And I said, "Photo." She went, and she showed me. This is going to sound really silly to modern people who are used to technology, and you can just send a picture on your phone like that. We didn't have that back then.
No.
There's my photo, right?
Yeah.
They just had the foresight to scan the passport photo and use that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That was a relief.
And just to reiterate why this isn't as insignificant as it sounds is, had I been in an English travel agent, they would no way have had the initiative to scan the one on the passport.
No.
I would have just got to the place and they'd say, "Sorry, sir, there's a problem with your visa." I'd have had to phone the travel agent and they say, "Sorry, sir, you forgot to give us your photograph." You know, but no, in Asia, so efficient. They just went, "Right, scan that." And
I think you're right. The people, and also we have to bear in mind that travel agencies are really died over here because people don't need their services. They're online and they do their Expedia bookings or whatever. But in Asia, when somebody goes to people who organize things, whether it be for visas, employment, jobs in another country, they put themselves in their hands, and a lot of the people, their clients, don't know anything from filling in forms. They don't know. They just leave it with them, and they get used to dealing with all of it, and usually do a pretty good job because they know it. A bit like if we even go down a level of where things even get rougher. I know around the court buildings in streets in New Delhi or Mumbai or even in Kabul, you would find kind of scribe street, and there'd be little guys, sometimes women, by typewriters and a little card table in the street, and people would be lined up to go to them to do everything, any submission they needed to make to the court, any representation, any comprehension of documents that they'd be giving. And these people earned a living by knowing what people's likely problems were. And I'm sure they wouldn't sit there explaining the details of how, I don't know, some government department actually works. They just say, "Oh, we know what you want. We know what you need to do." Now, you'll get programs like those border crossing TV reality shows, and some poor schmuck from Asia's saying, "Oh, well, look, I don't know, the travel agent worked it all out for me." And they're scoffing at that, saying, "Oh, yes, a likely story. Go on, blame the travel agent. But, the statement here is that you never worked such and such." But in a way, it's true. They would go to a travel agency, and whatever was required to say, the agency would know that and write it in. There used to be a little trap about 1,000,000 years ago with US visas. If you wrote on the application, the question was, how long have you lived in the UK? If, let's just say you said you were born here. Now, a lot of people would write, well, let's see, I'm 54 now, so I guess I've been here 54 years, and they'd write that in. No, that was a fail. You had to use the phrase all of life, because if it was a number, 54 years, it would get flagged by the processing as, we want to know where he was before then. Even though if they looked at the date of birth, they should realize, well, in the womb, I mean, I didn't get a visa while I was in the womb, but, they let me go on that one. And there's a lot of little bits of crap, as you were saying with your border crossing there, that how things can deteriorate for no really sensible reason on some tiny bit of rubbish, because we've been through it before. Everything else is worked out in great detail, and then on some part of the day, simply have to go there and come back for something, but you don't get back because they put you on a different flight, and that meant you arrived at the wrong terminal and you had to go through some processing between the two terminals, and that meant somebody else's nose was on you and they wanted to know all about your business, and you weren't expecting to be having to explain about all your business at that point. So I had the same thing. all the cargo was safe. It was backpacked in the UK, ready to go back to Australia. My only little problem was, because of my travels, I'd ended my Australian passport, didn't have an entry stamp for the UK. So I said I was staying at the Portobello Hotel in London, a nice kind of stylish, kind of boutique hotel before they were popular. A lot of drunken musicians up and down the corridors. Anyway, I said to Chloe, look, I'm going to whip over to Paris this morning, right? I'm going to go over on, it was a glorious piece of documentation, Chris. I think you're too young to remember them, but they were called a British visitor's passport. They're a piece of cardboard you bought from the post office for, I forget what, like £10 or something. And it was good for the EEC countries in those days. Your photo was stapled or with a fancy looking rivet gun thing and it had a couple of red stamps on it. But the good thing about it was, when customs saw it, I've just been to Europe, this idiot, and waved you on. So I said, well, I'm going to go to Paris on the cardboard job from the post office, turn around at Charles de Gaulle, take the next flight back, and get the entry stamp with the Australian one. So when I leave later on, yeah, it makes sense. She said, "You going to take some luggage?" Well, I'll take a bag, but I really, just so I'm not wandering around with nothing in my hand. And I grabbed something or other and emptied it and put a towel in there and a shaving kit and jumped on the plane. Now, so this is a routine bit of housekeeping. Nothing should go wrong, right? I go to Paris, fine with that. Jump back on another plane, arrive, produce the Australian passport, stamped in, good, I've got that. Stick that down my trousers and walk on through. Now, I'm not carrying anything, so I'm not really thinking of anything except where I'm going to have lunch and stuff like that. I get to, Terminal 2 at Heathrow, normally pretty good in those days. In fact, it was a ghost town. Perfect. But there was one customs officer there. Now, tell me what you think of this guy from a distance. Customs officers, yeah, white shirt, uniform, usually standing around talking to a colleague or whatever. This one by himself, tall, long hair. Yeah. Now, well, we're talking about 1980s, I guess, but very early 79 or something. So there was a kind of fashion thing where even officials would have slightly longer hair. But to my mind, they're the kind of official who wants to be a little bit rebellious within his group, don't you think? I mean, did you ever have anybody who pushed the appearance code in the services kind of to the edge?
Yeah, like all of us.
Yeah, but one of the characteristics of that thing is that, so that the guy, I guess, with the long hair is not considered useless at his job, he actually makes a point of being rather efficient at his job. So he kind of dives on me. Where you been? Paris. Oh yeah. Where's the ticket? Yeah. And here's the problem. My ticket is in a different name going over there, so I can't produce that one. So I whip out a passport, but I don't give him the cardboard one. In a stupid kind of, well, this is the last thing I used, I should show it. I've given him the Australian one, and he's gone to town on that. Didn't like it. There were Thailand stamps in it. Oh, come over here. I think, oh, this is taking time. I should be out of here soon. The bag I've picked up carelessly at the hotel was one I'd been traveling around, just in-flight soft carry bag. Hadn't paid any attention to it for months. Down in the corner of the front zip pocket was a little bit of hash that had been floating around in there, wanting to be smoked and neglected carelessly by all of us for all these months. And there it was. He pulled it out. And I knew at that moment, Chris, that my day was not going to be pleasant, because I'm standing there. I've got another passport down my trousers in a different name, and they're going to take me and give me a strip search and find that, and get onto the airline's ticketing computers and look at all my movements and draw their own conclusions. So, yes, it was a small bit of administrative travel, you could say, that I didn't give proper care and attention to because I was dismissive. There were no kilos of A-class drugs. There was no plutonium. There was no, gold shipment. There was nothing that you would normally focus your mind on. I just needed a rotten bit of stamp in my passport. It was...
it's always the small things that trip you up. It's
yeah. I mean,
complacency.
I didn't get out of there until... I didn't get out of there at all. It was midnight by the time they've checked the airline, and they see that me and my girl are traveling out that night, going back to Australia, and they want to know what we've been up to. But she was a bit of a smart cookie, old Clelia. When she was dragged in, she was under a phony passport, but was checked out. She was in a position to say, "Oh, I only met the guy in my travels in Thailand. Good time, Charlie. That's all he was to me, nothing." Yeah, but what she said, "Well, why all these different passports? What's it?" I don't know, but he did have a couple of big suitcases with him, and then somebody came in Thailand and picked them up, and he was all relaxed after that. They're saying, "Damn, we've missed it. It's headed off in another direction." So she was good like that. And I came the wash up. She was going to be nicked for having snotted a female customs officer because she took objection to being strip searched, and supposedly flushed something down the loo, which was where she was taken for that. But I said, "Look, I'll plead to the bit of hash. I'll accept that, and in return, you let the girl go. And she doesn't know anything. She's just an idiot." Oh, well, that's no way to talk about it. All right, we'll go for that. Now, there's one fly in the ointment here. As they've pounced on her where she's staying at the hotel, but at the time she'd put her telephone number with some friends of ours. Now, friends of ours, they don't always tell you their background, do they, Chris? I mean, you ask somebody who's come in on something, "You clean? You got anything I should worry about? Something I need to know about? Any mischief?" "I don't care, mind. You can be a cannibal for all I care. I just need to know in case, No, I'm good. Yeah, fine." That like shit. Turns out they've got, I'm sure it happened to some colleagues of yours. It turns out they'd been arrested in bar fights in Phuket. They'd been forced marched out of Japan for disgracing themselves, or there's still some prostitute who wants her money in Amsterdam that's put in a case against him. These things come up. Now the people where she was staying, they had a past indeed, so they were up to a lot of mischief. Nothing that day, but what it meant was the cargo had come back into the Heathrow airport because it was in my luggage bags and her luggage bags. But they couldn't find it when they opened it up. It was just a machine. And they, like a stereo player, and very well made. You had to smash the thing to ribbons to find anything inside. But, I'm still looking at a 20-year sentence under that. Now, everybody's happy with me taking the plea, letting the girl go, calling it a night. They've called out some guys wearing a bow tie who was at the opera because the case looked like it was going to lead to something big, what with the Fulham Road connection with the people there and the multiple passports. But they're calling it on it, letting me go. Long hair, the customs guy, doesn't like it. He's tapping this radio case thing, saying, wait, yeah, no, it doesn't. Why would he be so concerned that he actually wanted to make sure he had the right exit stamps? Something was still yet to happen of significance. And I've dismissed all that with, no, I just didn't want to have to explain why I changed passports during travel, because they don't like you doing that. Anyway, his senior thought, no, look, long hair, we're calling it a night, let him go. The girl goes and said to me, well, you're going to take all this luggage with you to the jail, we're going to oppose bail because you had different passports. Oh, no, I'll give it all to the girl. I mean, gee, she's had a hard time. I've dragged her through the mud, All right, yeah, that'll do. So she's gone off with that. She's got the cargo back. And long hair doesn't like it. And they've all gone to sleep on it. The next day, I'm in Brixton thinking, well, could have been worse. I'm going to have to plead to one of the passports, but I think I can wriggle out of that because it wasn't a British one. And okay, so a bit of hash, what's the worst that could happen? A few months. Brixton in those days was a riot. Prisoners could still have one can of beer a day if they were on remand, and they had visits every day on remand. It was the visit centre was a riot of exchanging of cargo and bits and things and numbers, and of course it was before phones and all of that. So all the messages you could see the big villains table. They're all chunky sized and all lined up with their villains' wives coming in, dolled up to the max, because your villain in those days didn't like the missus looking like a bit of trailer trash. So and through this carnival, and on the other side was sort of the broken wrecks. Through all this noise, clearly, I said, well, at least you got the cargo back. I mean, you put that somewhere safe. Not exactly. When I got back, I told our friend, the people who used to be in the business are no longer, the ones whose reputation causes most of this headache. Yeah. I told him that it was there. I thought, owe it to him you owe it to nobody to reveal something. Saying nothing. God, how many times have I said to everyone, saying nothing and wait and see what happens? This will pay off, I promise you. St. Peter at the gates of heaven will welcome you, saying, welcome, friend, because you said nothing. And the guy in Fulham panicked over all of this, broke up the container, had put a couple of bits of it up his nose, and then said, I've got to get it out of the house in a frenzy, ran down, threw it in a tip or a dumpster or something or other, because the next day was rubbish day. And that was it. But it wasn't quite it, because I said, wait a minute. So let me get this clear. It's all been opened up. It's everywhere. The marching powder and the other stuff from Thailand is all a mess. No. He couldn't get to the inner container. He only got to a little one for his personal use. And all right. And this is in a rubbish bin somewhere. So I gave him a number. Now, I gave Clelia, I gave her a number. And this would be a bit like a number, I don't know, if we'd known each other before. Can you imagine being woken up by some young girl who said, look, I'm David's latest or next or dearest. He gave me your number because there's a little bit of a problem. And you'd probably say, well, let me have a coffee and I'll do some listening. And she explains that I'm locked up. The stuff has been thrown in a rubbish bin, which may or may not have been collected. And it needs to be retrieved, and she needs to be put somewhere and stuck back on a plane and got out of the country. And he'll be eternally grateful and he'll be rewarded suitably. And you think, yeah, I've heard that before. Well, but that's what I did. And this guy, Robert, went with her and headed down to where the rubbish was. Well, it was before wheelie bins, but it was all piled up. It was piled up, except it had been cleared. Now, the girl and my friend Robert, the capable person, we'll call him, with a cap similar to yours, arrived in time to see my friend from Fulham having woken up with a clear head and think, oh my God, I've just thrown out like £100,000 worth of stuff. Am I mad? So he's got himself a little gunny sack and running down the street after it. My girl and Robert are after it, but they're not alone. The customs have all had a good night to sleep on this and decided, wait a minute, we mad, we've banded over the stuff. They've gone down to get it. But fortunately, Robert was quite good at knowing what to do in those situations. He caused enough racket on a street corner so that the customs people spotted Mr. Fulham and thought, aha, now we're at it. They got busy with each other. Meanwhile, Robert went down there and the bin was empty, so he went straight to the dump and actually found it. I mean, how, found it within a very short space of time. And it was still in its plastic sealed containers with Allen keys that had been buried under resin. Took that, buried it somewhere else, because I told him, look, it's weatherproof and all of that. And got her back on a plane and all was well. Well, except they built a car park over the thing where he buried it sometime later, but that's another story. But it does go to illustrate where it all this started, where this night of terror and me in a magistrate court getting 6 months for a bit of hash and a couple of iffy documents. It started simply because I was crossing a border doing nothing, I thought. But in fact, as we all know, it's when you think you're doing nothing and no harm done, that's when you get into trouble. Don't you find that, if you look back on your own things?
Yes. When you get lackadaisical, yeah.
Well, it's, I think, too, I've been in situations where, you probably had friends who, I don't know, and this particularly applies to weed, marijuana, they'll feel it should all be legalized. Fine, who disagrees with that? Nobody. But because of that, they get particularly brave and foolish because it's almost like they're challenging the world to, go on, arrest me. You're doing something wrong. I should be able to do this thing. And you'll say to them, well, didn't we agree that the following precautions were going to be done? Yeah, but it was a bit of weed in the end. A bit of weed, and we can still go to the, Barry place with the keys and all of that. And people's sense of what's right and wrong really interferes with their judgment over. Say you and I are going to, I don't know, Kazakhstan or Belarus. We're going to take into account the fact that right and wrong, what we think is good and bad in the world, has got nothing to do with anything. What we've got to decide is how they operate, how they play their game there. What it is that, we'd find somebody local that wasn't a troublemaker, didn't have a cause or an axe to grind, but just knew his or her way through the minefield of living in a totalitarian state. And look at that kid who got snatched off a plane, who fell to pieces. I mean, what a wimp. He was saying sorry the next day. What was his name now? Romeo Rotunda or something. Anyway, I forget it. But he, it was a bit over the dinner, effectively hijacking the plane, demanding it come down because of a bogus bomb threat, wasn't it? And then there were already some KGB types on board who sort of disappeared. And then they grabbed this kid. And he was a blogger, but it's all very well for him to sit in his studio flat mouthing off to his cell phone. And in a place, well, he wasn't in the place which had caused him. He wasn't in Belarus at the time, I think. But of course, he's poked his thumb and nose at them, and he probably thought, well, I'm perfectly safe. There's nothing they can do. In a way, it's a lesson to all people who think, oh, I'm immune from all this. I'm young and cocky, and nothing can happen to me. Of course, it wasn't it was an overdone thing for somebody. What is he? He's just a mouth. Why should the leader of that country care one way or another? But probably when the opportunity came up, I guess some spook must have said, look, that flight that he's going on next week, it overflies our country. So here's our opportunity. And whatever happens to last week's outrage anyway, Chris? I mean, people saying, well, there'll be sanctions over this. Oh, yes, yeah. Let's apply them to the individuals in the state control of whatever it might be. They don't care. So their wife has to go shopping in Paris instead of them, It doesn't mean anything. Of course, because as much as the government might leap to their defense and say, oh, this or that, take the case of that, the woman, Zaghari. Is it Radcliffe Zaghari? She's her husband's British. He must be the Radcliffe part. And she's Iranian born, so she has dual citizenship. I think she's still there, isn't she? She's been held, over 5 years? Something like that.
Yeah, what was she held for? It was something...
Well, maybe something gets lost in translation with the Iranian, but the Persian crime was spreading disinformation in the employ of a foreign agent or something to that effect. Kind of low-level spying. And Boris, he wasn't PM in those days when she was first arrested, but he made it worse by not even taking the trouble to read from the Foreign Office what it was she was doing there. She was seeing family or something. And she had a young daughter. He said that he seemed to think she was a teacher. And, oh, well, why shouldn't a woman be able to teach children about freedom? Oh, shut up, you idiot. So he's buried her. He's a careless kind of politician, isn't he? He's quite a gambler, don't you think? He's opened up from a kind of semi-bogus Freedom Day, thinking that, okay, a lot of cases, not a lot of deaths. He's made a friend in old Cummings, hasn't he? What a traitor that guy is, huh? He's a right-hand man.
Well, the funny thing is about these individuals, they are so far from enlightenment, David. And enlightenment is everything. It's the only thing to live for. To understand your place in this incredible universe, and to want for nothing except to just breathe fresh air. These individuals, they live toxic lifestyles. I mean, they literally fuel their body with the alcohol, lavish.
That's true. And not just alcohol, but over fatty food. Yeah. And
they're all sexual perverts, or most of them are, because they've been through the public school system, so they've been getting touched
buggered
up
and beaten from an early age. Yes.
Yeah, they've been getting touched up since they were 9 years, probably 6 years old. And this just, if you don't work through these things, which those individuals haven't, because if they had, they wouldn't be doing the job. They would have to leave that job behind because it's so toxic.
Yeah.
And here's the irony. we don't just recognize these incredibly toxic individuals, but we vote for, or well, I don't, I've never voted, but the can we say the naive public go to the polls every 4 years or whatever it is and vote these sociopathic losers in again under the mistaken belief that they actually like care about you. Not knowing that they serve one function, and that's to protect the power hold, the stronghold.
The Sir Humphreys in the mandarins of government.
Exactly. But I've got one for you, David. Tell me what you think of this. My uncle, he's no longer with us now. He lived a life to excess, you could say.
Right. A role model, you might say.
Just, if you do that stuff, if you live a rock and roll life, you are going to die young. You've got to learn to rein it in at some point, right?
Well, yes, if you want to be able to sit back and relax, but I can't argue with somebody who goes out in a blaze of glory. What happened with your uncle?
Well, it wasn't a blaze of glory. It was incredibly sad, like obesity, diabetes, alcoholism, all of that sort of stuff. But anyway, he found a new life for himself in Phuket.
Okay.
Having been a small scale kind of a dealer in this country. And anyway, I don't need to sort of go into his story too much, but he came home to the UK once and he brought his Thai wife with him. We're at my late mother's house and we went, Chris, you want to roll a joint? And he thrust at me this tub, like the sort of tub you have nutritional pills in with a peel off, the white one with a peel off lid. And he thrust me this tub. It was, about so big. If you listen on iTunes, we're talking like 5 inches high.
Okay.
And I peeled off the lid. It's full of weed, Thai weed, right? And I said to him, how the hell? Because, for friends at home, it's the death penalty in Thailand, probably still to this day, but it always was for any kind of trafficking of narcotics. So
yes, if you get caught at the airport, the penalties are very much different from anywhere else. Yeah.
And I said, how did you bring, I expected him to say, I had it hidden in my suitcase or had it down my pants or something like. He went, I just had it in my pocket. I'm like, okay, does that technique work? And I've been through a few airports. I know it's. And he said, well, I got to the customs, the security check bit, and the woman in Thailand pulled me to one side and said, as they do, sir, can I have a word with you? And she said, could you empty your pockets? He said, so I just emptied everything into the tray. She picked up this pot, peeled the lid off, looked in and went, put the lid on, handed it back to me.
So,
what do you make of that?
Now, what was your uncle's opinion? That she knew what was in it, but just couldn't be stuffed going on with it, or she thought
this conversation was about 15, if not 20, about 15 years ago now. So I honestly can't remember, but I don't know if she thought it was herbs. She just didn't know. I'm sure being in that job, what we.
I was just thinking of the smell, but that aside, okay, it could have been the thing going in his favor. I knew somebody once who was did a suicide run, you could say, from Costa Rica, and I said, well, where did you have it? Did you get somebody to pack it, or did you just? No, I just rolled it up, a kilo of coke in my jeans and threw them in the suitcase, and that was it. It got through. Nobody even checked it. But in this situation, because your uncle didn't make any attempt to conceal it. He didn't get nervous when it was produced. It was sitting there on the tray with a whole lot of other stuff. Now, the woman who was checking it was security, wasn't she? That was her job, making sure there's no bombs on board or weapons. So she wasn't customs, and she wasn't particularly, a narcotics person as such, though, as you say, working there, you'd know all about it. I suppose we've only got two ways of going on it. Either she's okay, even if it was pressed, squashed in to this economy multivitamin size pill container, it was still, by weight, that would be probably around 350 grams tops, I guess, because even if you squash it, it's still quite lightweight. It's not in her hands a bomb, not sulfuric acid or something like that. So it hasn't triggered any of the things she's programmed in to respond to. And the fact that here it is, your uncle is not saying, oh, I can explain that or whatever. But, oh, by the way, when you keep saying you peeled off the inner seal, in the beginning, had he glued that on, that inner seal? I'm guessing so. So if he'd done that and she peeled it off, then yeah, whatever it was. Do you recall what the label was? I mean, if it said something like
long time ago,
but whatever the label was, no doubt didn't match in any way. What
I like to think it was like the time I was working in a supermarket in Norway, and I'm sat on the checkout, and with the cameras, we had the TV screens for the cameras, and there were only two in the shop. And generally speaking, Scandinavians are the most honest people on the planet. You could, if you drop your wallet on the pavement and you return the next day to go and pick it up, someone will be stood there and they'll say, it's very inconsiderate of you to drop your wallet in the middle of the pavement. Somebody could fall over that, Right?
That's good. I like that. I mean, I thought you were going to say, we're waiting for you to come back for a wallet, but he's gone the extra bit. You're making a public nuisance of yourself, leaving money where anybody could slip on it.
But yeah. I'm in this supermarket and I'm sat on a till, and a guy comes in and he's got a bag over his shoulder. And I just looked up at the camera and I saw him. I looked up at the TV screen and I saw him go to the back of the shop where all the beer was. Yeah. And he went, grabbed two, they're like 3 liter bottles of beer or so, 2 liter bottles, put them in his bag, and then he made a beeline out. And as he,
right.
As he came past me, I said something like,
I mean, did he buy anything at all to at least?
No. He made a beeline out.
Yeah.
And as he passed me, I said, "Drikke du all?" I said, you drink beer? Or I said, do you like lekker du all? Do you like beer? And he went. I wasn't. Supermarkets can take a bit of a hit, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, it was probably either. If he was wealthy enough so he could buy it without, it affecting the rest of his day, he probably would have paid for it, because from what you say, he sounds a bit nervous, and so this was not something perhaps he did routinely. But I understand what you mean. Even, a job like that, you're thinking, well, am I seriously going to run down and chase this guy down the street and take the beer back off him just to, spare the supermarket the loss of, 100 kroner or something like that? Fuck no, good luck to him. Skål.
Yeah, well, I
How long did you work there for?
That was the best part of about 6 months. It was actually in Oslo.
Sounds like the steadiest job you ever had. 6 months.
let me tell you a few things about it, because it was fascinating. First of all, they had they had a policy. The supermarket, I won't say, I probably better not say the name now because of what I'm going to tell you, but they had this policy, David. If you could find an item on the shelves,
right,
and it went out of date, either it, if it went out of date on this day, right?
Yeah.
You could take it up to the counter and say, excuse me, this goes out of date today. And they say, okay, it's yours. Literally give it to you for free, right?
Wow. They must have had people in there doing that.
Yeah. If you found an item that had already gone out of date, legally they couldn't let you have it because it was out of date. So they would give you the value in money. So what I started to do, and it became a hobby for anyone with that kind of, I don't know, not scavenging mind, but you know, people.
Well, beachcombing, let's put it like that.
Beachcombing. That's a much better expression. Yeah. So I started to finish my work in the suit, and then I'd go around all the others. And one time I looked in the freezer compartment. There's 6 sides of salmon, and they've all gone out of date.
Wow.
So I'm just pick them up, take them to the checkout, and of course, a side of salmon over there, you're talking it's probably about 40 quid, maybe. I mean,
yeah, it's still not cheap. Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's not cheap here, but this is Norway of all places. So they're giving me.
What do they call it? Lux, don't they?
Yeah, lax, yaks, or gravlux, which is when they bury it. Which is an ancient Scandinavian fish preserving technique for anyone who's wondering why you bury fish. You do it.
I think they do that. Yes, in Sweden I've seen it, and it stinks to high heaven too.
That's in Iceland. They call it harkol, which is a shark that's got so much uric acid in it you can't eat it. You have to bury it for a year, then you come back. And this is all kind of, you know, Inuit sort of technique. But so that was that's what I would do. But the other thing as well.
I mean, was that enough to I don't know, get a subsistence level living out of scanning the shelves?
Well, here's the thing, right? I worked there for 6 months, and on the first month, my pay came through, and I went to the boss, and he was a very nice guy. I mean,
They're all nice.
Scandinavians, generally speaking, they're a bit conservative, but they're generally really nice. And I said, boss, look, I've got a student's pay. I'm an adult. They'd given me what you'd pay a student, you know, the minimum, below minimum wage even. And it never got sorted out despite me continually asking. So by the time 6 months come around, I kind of got a bit cross about it, David. And so what happened was, get myself in trouble here, but somebody would come in and you'd get a couple of things. You'd get people that didn't want to queue or people in a hurry.
Right.
They'd come running in and say, Chris, 40 smokes, whatever the brand was there, and you'd give them 40 smokes, and as you went to hit the till, they just thrust the money at you and they'd run. Well,
interesting.
At which point I began turning to the till, because there's a camera on me typing it in, but without actually hitting a key, and then surreptitiously hitting the till open button, and the till would go ching ching, and I put them, you know, the money in, close it, and just making out that he'd give me the exact money, and I put it into it. The other thing would happen is someone would come up, save a crate of beer. But that's a lot of money. You're talking.
It's very high tax on beer, isn't it?
Oh, you're talking maybe it's £50 or something. It's quite. I mean, one beer can be 50 crowns. So 10 beer, 500 crowns. So that's about 50
quid. Yeah.
If it's 20 beers in a pack, it's about 100 pack. I mean, it's quite a lot.
Yeah.
So they come through, put the beer on the thing, on the conveyor belt. I would turn. I would scan it into the till.
Right.
And then I'd turn and rather than No, that's what I'd do. I'd scan it into the till, and then I'd hit check price.
Okay.
If someone had said, Chris, can you check the price of that for me? Yeah, sure. So I'd scan it, hit check price. They'd look at the number that would come up, you know, let's just call it 100 kroner.
Yeah.
50 krones.
Mm.
And I'd look at them. They'd then naturally hand me the money as you would, still not realizing I haven't put this in the till yet. I've just hit just hit the check price. And then I'd hit the till open button. You get so good at calculating in your mind the price when you do a job like that. You can your maths just becomes instantaneous, and instantly in my mind I know what change I've got to give them. I'd hand them the change, and then I'd just hit the button on the till which said print last receipt.
Okay.
And then the machine would go brrr, brrr, and the paper would come out.
And they'd never read it. Yeah.
By which time they're halfway out the shop.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it an awful lot, David, I have to say, but in all the times I did it, nobody ever turned around and said to me, oh, can I have the receipt? Had they done so, I would have gone, yeah, sure. Oh, sorry, it's not gone through properly. I would have just screwed it up, thrown it in the bin, and then just
and rang it through properly.
Kind of, can I have that back? And then done it sort of properly. But let's just say I made a couple of quid to go traveling.
I mean, look, that supplemented your wages, commensurate of the level of your value. I like to think that it was balancing the books. After all, they were paying you as a student, and you did. Studied the formation of the till very well.
Yes. And one other thing I did. I'm sorry if I'm giving young people.
No.
Friends listening, believe it from someone who's been there. I'll find being law abiding is just so much the best way. Not having to look over your shoulder and wonder when your liberty is going to be taken away.
It's tiring.
It's please believe me, this is my young misspent youth. But
having given all those disclaimers, give us another juicy bit.
Okay, so I'd get a bin bag, big industrial kind of bin bag, and when it was just me in the shop, I knew where all the cameras looked, so I knew how to tip. It's a bit like a Tom Cruise movie. I knew how to move around the shop
and all of that. Yeah.
And I'd go around the shop and I'd just pick all my favorite food. So tins of this, joints of this, a big pack of beer, and I'd fill this bin bag, and then I'd go and throw it in the skip. And of course, after locking up that evening, if either I locked up or someone else locked up, I'd just leave it, and then I'd cycle back after hours in the dark, again avoiding the camera, which is pointing sort of at the or whatever. And I'd go open the skip, pull out this huge bag of food, and
that sounds like a perfectly sensible way of getting through. And wisely didn't knock off for the day and immediately run round to the skip. That would have.
Well,
I mean, it would have worked once, but if somebody saw you regularly going around to the skip, that might have been.
It's that funny thing where I think karma is definitely a thing. I think I've paid for my behaviors in life. I think I've paid.
You've balanced the books, haven't you?
I've paid the piper big time, and I'm glad to learn from these lessons, because it's meant my life's pretty balanced now. But you've got to remember, Norway have been blessed with actually living next to one of the biggest oil fields in the world.
I know, it's extraordinary, isn't it? They have a sovereign wealth fund that's actually worth something, whereas every other country I can think of in the West owes its gross net income several times over in debts that they just rack up, especially these days. Yet their citizens are taken care of from cradle to grave for the next several generations due to that.
If you go sick in Scandinavia, Sweden or Norway, you don't just get some like dole payout for 50 quid a week or whatever it is we get here.
Right.
You get your full salary.
Really?
I had a friend, Steiner. which funny enough translated means stoner, and he was a big stoner. But he went around one of these factory fishing ships where they scoop up all the fish, and they've got the crew on board to fillet them as they go, so they make double the money and get it to market really quick.
And it gets frozen on board, doesn't it?
Gets frozen on board. It's a big refrigeration ship as well, and it's very boring, hard work. I did it at shore based in a factory I managed 9 months of it, and he hated the job so much he took the filleting knife and they're razor sharp, and he just went,
wow,
pulled it across his palm, put a gash so deep you can see the sinews of his.
Oh, what, all the cables were revealed and all that.
But he did it, and then of course he got 7 months off work, full pay, and that's full pay. Even back then was probably £2,000 to £3,000 a month, and we're talking again 20 years ago. So probably about £5,000, £5,000 or £6,000 now. It was a lot of pay that you get on those ships.
I suppose, though, when you, it sounds pretty gruesome, but on the other hand, at least he didn't like stick a hand into a thrashing machine or have his leg broken. I've seen people with. I knew a guy once who wanted to get to an outside hospital from within a prison that went to the gym and put his leg between two benches and said to a colleague, listen, grab that 50-kilo major weight there and drop it on my leg. And after 3 attempts, it shattered it into like a trillion little bits. And Lucky Bob, that was his name, he never walked properly again after that. And didn't stop him trying to escape. But your friend didn't, maim himself for life. As bad as that cut was, you could see it's on a thing that will heal up. He might have gone a little deeper than perhaps he should have, but
David, have you seen Billy's film?
Oh, Billy Moore's.
Yeah.
A Prayer Before Dying, is that one?
Yeah.
Well, I have, and I don't know what you thought about it, but I thought it looked very good. I've got a friend lives in Thailand who is wealthy and throws money into things, and he put some into that. I don't know if it must have done at least well enough to pay for itself. But as I say, I thought it looked very good. Didn't have a great resemblance to life in there, but it was, don't you think, after all, more of a sports film than anything else? A young man overcomes adversity and fights his way out of trouble, and so it was good from that point of view. As I say, not only a passing resemblance to the real way of living in there, because you know yourself that in captivity, most of the time is intensely boring, and sitting around listlessly, wondering whether you can improve the quality of your food or something like that.
What's it like then? Because Billy obviously had a big yaba problem there, so that's meth.
Well, yaba, I kind of lost interest in the personal use of speedy things at a relatively young age because the hangover was so, the fatigue after was so draining, and the temptation to think, oh, look, I just can't get through today without a little snifter of that to keep going. And then, anyway, but the yaba thing, friends tell me, lingers. I mean, it's very slow to metabolize, so it's kind of within your system for a long time. And its name became muddied in Thailand, and didn't need much mudding anyway, due to truck drivers going constantly, banging at it, and then getting to the point where they're not exactly sleeping at the wheel, but they're no longer a conscious human being with the capacity to operate a truck, plowing into half a dozen people. So it was considered quite serious. But the life in the prison was mostly a lot of people confined in spaces. When people first come in anywhere, they get the worst of it. And Thailand was no exception. The searches were ridiculously thorough going in. Especially if you were Thai, they'd cut the soap bars in half. They'd squeeze the shampoo out onto a piece of newspaper, as with every other liquid. And there was behind what would it be? An old dirty beach towel from Modesty was a couple of trustees with wearing gloves with 2 brown fingers. And I think the fact that it was 2 fingers is insult to injury as they bent over. But the fact that the gloves were made of wool was not helpful. I dodged all of that by various being a foreigner things and the chains. But they go into, so the first night and the first few nights, you get the worst of it so that you'll be encouraged to make things better for yourself. We were lined up like sardines. It was so crowded in the first night cell, head to feet, all down the line. And then the cell boss, the trustee who runs the first night reception thing, with his little square of lino over in the corner, and his own 2 sub-trustees, which were his servants. And he makes a long speech to the newcomers, which translates roughly as, well, I'm firm but fair. He's sort of like the drill instructor for every asshole you've ever met since school onward. One thing I can't abide is people taking a shit in the place. Now, that's out of the question. At a pinch, you can go over and take a wee, but be quiet about it and nothing after midnight. Anyway, and then I think from there, another place which was pretty awful, packed in there, the fan didn't work, overcrowded, bed bugs you're on the alert for all night, squashing them. Because you could see a line of squashed bed bugs around the black and brown edges of the cell rim where people had fought these off. So come morning, you're ready and willing to strike a deal. And the trustee, because prisoners run everything in the place, even opening the cell doors for the morning let out and locking them up. The guards just stroll around with their own gang of odious trustees, fawning and laughing at their crappy jokes and giving them leg massages. But as you know from Asia yourself, there's nothing like a whole bunch of people in a small space to bring out the organizational abilities of everyone. And the Thai Chinese, who really, Chinese Thais run everything in Thailand. So you remember some years ago, the government they got sick of seeing Chinese names at the helm of every company, at the management levels, at the graduations, at the technical schools, the engineers running the power station. So they made the Chinese Thais of the second generation get Thai names, of which they chose from a handful that had a phonemic sound that mirrored something lucky in Mandarin. But nonetheless, it was still the Chinese running it. And no exception with prison. The Chinese ran the general store called the coffee shop for some reason. And it kind of sold everything from rice to, it had a little barber shop next door. That was a sub-concession. You could go in there with 2 rickety ancient 1920s barbershop chairs in there. And you got, there was some Frankie Valli pictures around an early Presley, fading color photographs of the available hairstyles. A little lending library, complete with, so you paid a fee for a novel or something like that, but most of its business was in low-level pornography, which had been put, every page of the porno magazine for rent had been laminated, punch-holed, and put in a folder and numbered. So it had to be returned with all the numbers sequential, so it hadn't been torn out, and thoughtfully laminated with something that could be sponged off. and it was good form to sponge off your returned porno book in the morning. At the corner of the general store was a bank. Yeah, it had a little teller's window. Cash was outlawed, but the guard sitting there got his 10%. And he took that from the 25% that the Chinese bankers in there had managed to do something, how they got to your official prison account to get it. What they did was, and you saw none of the machinery of how they worked this out, was they allowed prisoners who were well behaved to spend a small amount of their private money to buy, I don't know, a jar of coffee or something. That was the wedge in the door. And the foreigners a bit more of their money because they ate foreign things, you know. I don't know what it was that we ate, what caviar and champagne, but it certainly seemed that way with what we were paying. And so for every 1,000 baht that you take out in cash, you had to pay 12.50 or something like that. So that was a good little business for them. And not only that, the cash that you got, you walk around the corner and you're paying it back to the same general store. That store, mind, you had to bung the building chief, and there were 10 major buildings each with 1,500 people, prisoners in there. That building chief wanted a big chunk of the profits from the coffee shop general store. Even they had a kind of a very secretive phone booth in a little storeroom within the coffee shop with one of the earliest, because when I was there was 93 to 96, so mobile cell phones were in existence, but the network was poor. But nonetheless, they had one, so I could make a call, and managed after various bits of hell to overcome to get through a call to my friend Michael that I'd been business partners with, but also a good friend. And he hadn't heard from me for over a year, and had heard some rumor that I'd been grabbed in Asia and was facing the death penalty. And by the time I got to use that phone, it must have been 3 o'clock in the morning when I connected through to his. And you know, I'm pouring out, or beginning to pour out, a long explanation of what happened and why and everything. Michael said, look, David, don't explain anything. We might be cut off on this line. Just tell me where I've got to be and what I've got to bring. And that's what you want from a friend, isn't it, Chris? I mean,
sweet.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to tell you this wonderful story. When Tor Heyerdahl built the Kon-Tiki raft, so the balsa wood raft to sail across the South Pacific, it's a treacherous journey. There's no, like, they haven't got a backup ship or anything like this.
No,
it's a raft with a sail, and all they've got is a World War II radio that they can get the odd kind of, you know, radio ham on. If they're lucky, they'll get someone in bloody, I don't know,
Vladivostok or something.
Yes, exactly, right. So, and if they make it to the islands that they were trying to prove that ancient indigenous populations did, even then they've got these treacherous reefs that they'll land on, with these thunderous rollers coming in that can just wipe them out and drown them all, right? So it's what we would call a suicide mission. One of those ones where you put the ad in the paper, volunteers required, mustn't mind dying.
Yeah. Let's have a very feeble grip on reality and love of life.
Yeah. So he, let me just finish this one. He put the shout out to a guy called Torstein Rabbi, who was I think he was the only Swede on the raft, and he's this guy. They've all been resistance up in Norway during the war, so they're all hard as nails. They've been living in the snow, eating moss and all this, and spying on the German shipping and stuff. So they're not opposed to harsh conditions. So Tor Heyerdahl sent a telegram to Torsten Rabi and said, I'm sailing a balsa wood raft across the Pacific to prove that indigenous communities traveled this way. I need volunteers. And the reply Torsten Rabi sent back was, I'm in. So
Short and
every
sweet.
time I'm asked now to do a challenge with, I'll say, I'm in.
Now, that's the it's the answer that you want, and tells everything. I was just picturing that the Kontiki, was it?
Kontiki, yeah, that was his first expedition.
And as you say, it was a demonstration that was feasible to cross the Atlantic, which I think everybody accepts that certainly Scandinavian fishing extended that far to Newfoundland anyway.
Yeah, it's funny that they actually, modern DNA science has shown that the Polynesian islanders, Easter Island, this kind of, that they actually are not related to South Americans. I think they're more related to New Zealand. So they'd come.
That's right. I mean, that is as far, which way I'm going here, east, as you can imagine, isn't it? Easter Island.
And the thing they didn't realize is they didn't understand how steerable a raft is if you understand the technology.
Right.
You have these things called centerboards that you shove down it through the raft into the water. You can have any number of them configured in various configurations.
Right.
And it means when the wind hits that sail, you can actually steer against the wind and have complete control over your boat, as opposed to the theory that you're just at the
mercy of the wind.
Yeah. So that
isn't there a kind of sail arrangement too that does a similar, I forget the nautical term for it, but it's effectively, when you look at the wind pattern and where it's going, it's as though you're sailing into a wind that should be pushing you back.
Yeah.
But it's really a very close sideways angle where the wind is crossing that sail, if you've done it right, and instead of pushing against it, is sucking it out. So the relative air pressures propel you, well, not absolutely forward, but on an angle, so you can zigzag your way across the world against what would be a fairly standard trade wind.
Tacking in essence, isn't it?
Tacking. Yes, that's right. And what happened to him, Tor Heyerdahl? I know that was, there was Kontiki 2, which was a slightly different design, but there were also people who built Viking era replica boats that pretty easily enough seem to go over there. I mean, when you look at them, don't you get the feeling these people must have been pretty hardy to go out there with, they'll have a barrel, no doubt, with fresh water and a couple of backup ones sealed so they don't get wrecked. And I don't know how much fishing they do, but they'd have everything that could be preserved by salting or whatever.
It's just incredible, isn't it? They just lie down by their oar when they need to sleep. If they get wet, sodden through, that's it. They're wet for the trip then. They've got a small chest of their possessions and they just go out raiding.
Yeah. I remember reading details of the Viking raid down the Seine, an attack on Paris. So I guess the real art to it would be figuring how you can get your loot back, if that's what you're planning. There's been quite a good set of studies in the last couple of years on using, you mentioned genetics and DNA tracing with the Easter Islanders, but also with the accepted view of how Britain moved from the kind of people of the last of the Romans in when it was a 410 AD or something that they officially left. But of course, people who lived here at the time would have been well Romanized for a couple of generations after that, until they couldn't get the tiles repaired or the hypercost fueled up underneath their villas. But I think I can imagine just the economics of it would have been the big difference. If you haven't got a paid for army occupying places and spending money, it'd be like Bangkok went into a bit of a decline after the Americans left Vietnam. A lot of the clubs closed. So you haven't got post-Romans. It's curious too that it never shows you how stubborn in a way in their views the people were, that they never, other countries became very Romanized in a sense. If we look at beyond Italy to France and especially Spain, what was called Dacia, and it was Bulgaria today, so much of their structures remained administratively on the Roman model, and when it was Christianized after Constantine, that kind of structure held, but it didn't really here. But the new studies of the DNA seem to suggest that rather than a whole bunch of Scandinavians coming over here and making the dominantly Anglo-Saxon one from the Celtic, there is a mix which is relatively peaceful. Your Viking was more of a settler here than a looter, because I'm guessing because there wasn't much to loot, and it's expensive taking your loot back. Whereas I'm sure a lot of property changed hands post-Romans, and there might have been, because it's never been documented, it might have been a bit of a westward land rush. After all, Scandinavia's got limited agricultural possibilities because it's much more seasonally strict, whereas I think the land, I can imagine a lot of more peaceful takeovers. Okay, they came here and they might have had a little squabble, but there was no great finds of big battles or death or carnage. And I suppose we have that to look back on, that in the lands in which we are speaking now have had relative peace for a couple of thousand years, apart from a Cromwellian civil war and a couple of Catholic purges here and there, a few crazy kings, but without any real effect. And yet other countries have had disastrous things, great sweeps of carnage and Mongol invasions and changes. And yet it was only, I guess, in the Industrial Revolution that powered up Britain to spread its wings a bit and go around and cause trouble in other parts of the world, but at the same time, export some, a lot of railways anyway. That's a good thing. The Jaipur Express probably wouldn't exist. Did you ever take rail journeys for pleasure?
Oh gosh, yes. You haven't lived, have you? If you haven't, I mean, some memorable ones. Bangkok to it doesn't go down as far as Phuket, does it? Phuket's an island, but where was
you can take the train from, I think, Chiang Mai. I mean, not one train, but you change a few, all the way down through Bangkok to the south, to the Malaysian border.
Suratani,
there's a crossing, and I had some reason to check it out. I think stops about, it used to stop about 50 miles shy of the border on the main line, and there were buses crossing into Malaysia. But I'm guessing now there might even be a proper rail link all the way down to the tip of Penang or something, for all we know.
Yeah,
I mean, did you get sleepers or just
yeah,
go to sleep on your seat or what?
I got the sleeper from Bangkok down. Basically, was staying at Koh Samui. So whichever way you get,
Right, yeah,
wherever the ferry goes from, I think it's Suratani. Apologies if I've got that wrong. I've done that trip, which was just wonderful. Back in my drinking days, you could buy a beer for 50p and just sit back in your chair.
Yeah.
Come 5 o'clock or 6 in the evening, they all come round and say, "Excuse me a minute, sir," and they miraculously morph this chair into a bed, comfortable bed.
Yeah.
Me and my brother were smoking joints out the window. I've just dropped my brother in the shit there.
It was years ago.
Yes, it was a long time ago, but that was memorable. I went from Moscow to St. Petersburg on one of the old, just a real old sleeper train. I got in the carriage. There was a gentleman in there, and I said hello, and he said hello, and
that was the extent of his English.
I said English. He said Ruski, and I said no. He went Portuguese. Sing. We both spoke Portuguese, so
really, yeah.
he'd been part of the rebel, one of the rebel, supporting the rebels for Lima, or was it Renamo?
Yeah, something like that.
During the civil war in Mozambique, and I'd worked in Mozambique as a volunteer worker. So
what were you doing? What, in a peaceful capacity, volunteer worker, was it?
Yeah, I taught in a street children's school for 6 months.
Okay.
In a place called Nakala Porto. And I'm just so lucky in my life, David. I can't believe I've had such incredible experiences like that. On the edge of the Indian Ocean or the Mozambique Channel.
Well, that's what we, as English speakers, at worst, that's what we can do. How many friends have you come across? I said, well, I was kind of at the end of things then, and so I taught English at something or other, a local private school or a volunteer school. My old friend John Russell, who was in Thailand with me for a while, after 20 years there, finally let him go. But he retired to Cambodia and lives there. And that's one of his things that he does. He teaches English and science at a local kind of free school. And it's very, very common. I mean, you don't get paid anything really. If you're lucky, you get a meal out of it or something like that. But you do get, you make friends. You get to meet the regular teachers, and they'll help you out one way or another. You'll find accommodation. So, it is that English have an ability to survive on, and not a great objection to, taking that transition to well, you shouldn't, and none of us should be too upset by having to live modestly. Those who can't adapt to that really are too tightly wound up in the things they expect of life, of not just their material things, but their social position and all of that nonsense, which counts for nothing, as you know. And it can be very relaxing, can't it, if there's you've lost the pressure to meet. I mean, I'm, looking at your life, I am half surprised that you haven't set up living in Asia somewhere, and I don't know what doing.
Believe
but
me, it's a conversation we have a lot in this house.
No,
I will say paradise #1 starts in our heads, doesn't it?
yeah.
But secondly, to have somewhere you can go out for a dip in the ocean every morning, I mean, that's
That'd be a dream, wouldn't it?
that's like a double. I mean, I live by the ocean here in the UK, so I'm not that far away, but it's a big difference plunging into a beautiful, pristine blue sea in Thailand than it is into the freezing cold, you know.
Where do you think would be? Where do you think it'd be good? I always thought that the potential. I mean, there's only so much coastland in the world, isn't there? You know, it's not going to get any more of it. Actually, get less of it as the seas rise. What happened to Doggerland? It's gone. Do you think southern Cambodia, Myanmar, some of the lower islands down there that have serviceable links with Thailand across the way. Well, where do you think it'd be good to set up a ne'er-do-wells last retreat hotel?
Well, I'm always going to say, and I don't know how realistic that this is now, but off Belize,
right, yeah.
There's a series of keys. One of them's called Kai Korka,
right,
and it's actually been split in half by a hurricane. Right, so it's probably not the best place to set up camp. But I went there, David, and I've scuba dived. I've been lucky to scuba dive in lots of locations around the world, from the Arctic. I've scuba dived in the Antarctic. I've scuba dived in, I think I've scuba dived in Argentina, Central America, Asia, Egypt, all these kind of places, or Red Sea. Here's the thing. Most of the stuff you see on the dive sites in these places is all dead. The tourism has just killed all the corals dead.
Really, yeah.
You go out in a group of maybe you're 10 people in your dive expedition, and you've got a guide that's showing you the local thing, and they'll be like, look, and everyone crowds around with their underwater cameras, and it's a little fish about that big, and
it's sad.
Apparently it's like really rare, but you don't really care about that.
No.
Then you go to Belize, right?
Yeah.
You're there in the blue hole, for example. The big blue hole is an underground cavern that's
I've seen
down.
pictures of them. Yeah.
Very.
Aren't they dark?
Yeah, it's black. When you look down, it's black. It's black, right? But you go down the wall of this crater. As an advanced diver, you can go down 40 meters, although you don't want to spend too long at that depth.
And you have to, the deeper and longer you go, you have to stage your way coming back up, don't you?
And also, because air compresses at depth, you breathe more of it a lot quicker, and you can really get into trouble if you're not
calculated your tanks properly. Yeah.
It's different now. You have a dive computer on your wrist, and it kind of tells you what to do. But so I'm there. I'm at the back of a group of fellow divers, and the dive guides at the front, and we're finning along, and it's wonderful. It's just wetsuit, no dry suit or anything. And then the dive guide just turns to me and says, "Shark." So I turn around, and out of the deep blue come 12 sharks, just swam right up to me, and literally just swam past my shoulder as if I wasn't even there. I reached for my dive knife just as a precaution, and the last shark was a bull shark. So the other ones were fairly benign, but there was a bull shark tagged on at the back of them. Bull sharks are known for the most attacks on man. Not that I was in any way thinking that was going to happen. It was a beautiful experience, but if you go in the national parks there that they've carefully preserved, it's like hopping into a fish tank in your local pet shop. It is just
Really?
vibrant, tropical fish everywhere. Huge lobsters. Like
Yeah.
the locals, they sneakily will put their mask and snorkel on, go into the nature reserve and they'll stay down for 40 minutes with diving, and they've got a metal gaff, and they're basically going after the lobsters, and they'll fill a huge bag. And it was just unbelievable. To every dive you do, you see a big shark, loads of other fish.
Now this was in Belize, but it was on the Keys, you're saying, off the coast.
Yes, off the coast.
And how is it set up? Is there of course there's a dive center, I guess, but is there accommodation there?
Yeah, you just find back then, obviously it will all have changed now because this was a while ago, but back then we had a guidebook. It wasn't Lonely Planet because that was a bit cheesy. That was kind of the mainstream tourist.
What's the other one that was a kind of somewhat grungier alternative to Lonely Planet? It'll come to me, but there wasn't another one.
Yeah, there was Lonely Planet, and then there was it Shoestring Traveler?
Something on a shoestring, yeah. Like they'd name a country, Central America on a shoestring, and they'd include places like.
But for the Americas, there was actually a deluxe book, completely,
very thorough. Was it?
like say, crap analogy, but port to wine, or port to cider. It was a really refined book. They put a lot of effort into, and it told you immediately you got to a place, you went to the accommodation section,
right,
and you could go for the 2-star, the 3, or the 4. So the 4 was like your, the Ritz would be listed there. The 2 or the maybe it was 5-star, I don't know, maybe, but I just always go for the 1-star. I'd get the cheapest dive I could find. Cockroach, I'd hang up my mosquito net, and so in Belize that's what I would have done. And
in Belize, John McAfee, the what was he, the security programs for computers. He was the founder of that company. He went to kind of as a sanctuary, ended up in Belize, got tangled up in a shooting there of a neighbor or something. They're not saying he did it, but they're not saying he didn't. And he kind of took off from there and got bailed in Costa Rica or something like that. I don't know where he is now. I mean, it's always a bit of a...
He's dead now, David.
Oh, that's right. He died. Yeah.
He got suicided, didn't he? From what?
Yeah. You're right. I knew the reason there was the story was in my head for something. And what do you think? That's it was a bit suspicious.
There's quite a few videos buzzing around of him on YouTube where when he was on the hoof, he did a lot of podcasts with people, and he's
unusual sort of person, wasn't he?
Yeah, quite an intense sort of guy, but you can tell what comes out his mouth. He's lived a bit, and he knows who's pulling all the strings.
Well, yeah, and he was a good mathematician. He he sold the company early on and took the money and ended up living with some young kind of like half street girl. But she was very attached to him and was always loyal to him. What he says about Belize, I'll take with a pinch of salt, because I used to have connections there when it had some very interesting banking for the independent-minded person. You could set up a company there and issue your banking cards to whoever you wanted. It's just that when we were traveling and you'd have say you went off with a new passport, you'd want some credit cards to go with that. Especially so as the world changed and you couldn't do anything without using a card for it. But rather than having a spin-off card, an extra card from an account that was linked to something, the Belize economy has a big banking sector, so you could set your company up there and run it. But it's unusual, isn't it? It was British Honduras for a long time, then had independence. McAfee said it was notoriously corrupt and this and that and the other, but yeah, so what? You're going to expect that around that part of the world. But do you think, I mean, if we set up, you know, kind of a hotel or something there, that would be stable enough environment for it, or pleasant enough to live in? Is it? It's full on tropical, isn't it? The weather.
Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, what we think of as tropical beaches as Westerners, very often you get to places and it's not. You're very surprised. Like, for example, Vietnam. I thought Vietnam. I just think tropics. It's tropical.
Yeah.
Beaches are going to be paradise. And no, it's quite rugged there. The very
rocky coastline, was it?
Yeah, rugged, windswept coastline. I don't mean rugged as in like Cornwall. I mean it's the wind's blowing. It's. Whereas, as you know, in Thailand, you go to a beach.
Oh, some of them are great. They're sheltered and
stunning, absolutely stunning. Belize is that. It's that one. It's the.
Oh, is it? Okay. Because I looked at it geographically, and it seemed to have a lot of in the more north in Belize. You went in a lot of. It was marked as kind of swampland. And I'm imagining all these mosquitoes, but I think so. Your inclination for your tropical haven would be more likely to be that way than say Asia.
It's a difficult one because I was in Australia, for example, and you all my life, I'm that age, and obviously you know this too, David, that lots of Poms emigrate to Australia because they think it's the land of milk and honey. It's going to be this big life, and I'm not saying it's not. Australia, an incredible country, especially when you get up into the tropics. But what I found is I found the expats there were really bland. Almost.
I know, yeah, that can be the case.
You know, they were just bland. They were like a football shirt and not much up top. And
look at when you go to Portugal and you look at the expat British community there, they are pretty dull.
Yeah, dull. Just not the sort of people you think.
Not party animals, anyway.
Yeah.
Or not even interesting people, really. But I tell you what, though, if you were on the run or something, that would be the place to mingle into, like a not a particularly low-level Spanish away from the coast British expats. You could be splattered all over the TV news, and your neighbour would say, "Oh, I don't think I've seen that guy around." No, and he's talking to him.
You've got quite a strong connection with Australia, David, haven't you?
I never really. Yes, of course, and I spent many early years there.
Yeah.
And a little when I was 12, I was on one of the Channel 9 networks. They had a junior news for kids, and I read that for a while. Fell in love with my co-presenter. I was 12, she was 17. It wasn't going to work out.
Done that. I've done that. That hurts.
Oh, it was tragic. I was very deeply moved, and she became a ballerina of all things. I often wonder what happened to her, but it's the early ones that last, isn't it? And
I'll tell you what. I wish you could bottle that.
The intense feeling that you have
of young love when you've got a crush on someone and they're older. Oh gosh, you're besotted. We went to France on a school trip,
right? And
we were like 10 years old, and they'd got one of the former pupils to come as a sort of chaperone for the kids, and she was the grand old age of 14 or something, right?
Oh,
and
over the hill.
She had boobs and everything, and I just developed this massive crush on her.
What? So you were mooning about her all the time?
When we got back, I had the most horrible holiday crash. I just crawled into bed under the duvet. Apparently, I had all my clothes on and my backpack still, and I just crawled into bed. And then when we went back to school, one of the teachers had kindly taken all these wonderful photos with his decent camera, and we had all the tanks on the beach at Aramonch and all this sort of stuff. And every photo I bought had picture of Lorna in it. And there she is sitting on a tank, and there she is outside the Eiffel Tower. And
I bet you treasured those photographs for years.
Oh, I don't know. I've no idea where they are now. I think they've long gone by the by. But I met her in a pub about 6 or 7 years ago. And
did you?
Yeah.
And I bet you then there was no. This was like meeting a totally different person. I'm sure.
Yeah, the thing is though, and this is the thing about I talk about enlightenment a lot, being an enlightened person and not is. If someone came up to me in a pub and said, "Do you know what? I got to say, I had a massive crush on you," I'd really understand how important that was in that person's life. I would now. I probably wouldn't have done in years gone by. In fact, I can tell you, the same thing happened to me.
No.
I won't go into that.
It sounds like there's a story there, Chris.
Well, yeah. Let's just say that was quite a.
And did this person who had the crush on you ever express the depth of the love that was felt to you?
Well, I've got to be careful what I say.
Yeah, I know where you're heading with this one.
I've got to be careful what I say, but my God, she come up to me and said, this girl come up to me on a random night out. I was in the city, and she went, "You're Chris. Do you remember me?" And I was like, "No, should I?" She went, and then she hit me with all this kind of undying love thing.
Yeah. Remember Buxton's holiday camp in 1968.
Yeah, it was that kind of like what was actually a one night romance. But but the thing with this Lorna was, I think she was a bit kind of maybe not embarrassed, but she was like, "Oh, right, okay." And then I felt the big idiot, David, for pouring my heart out.
Well, that's the thing is, I mean, ideally you want, you want her to say, "Oh yeah, I remember you. Yeah, you were a cute little thing or something."
She could have just said, "Oh, that is so sweet. Thank you." You know, but she was like, "Oh, really?"
Okay, what, does that mean you're my stalker now? Are you the guy that's been shitting in my letterbox?
I wonder who's been nicking my underwear off the line.
Yeah. It is. I think adults are very quick to dismiss and belittle what preteens and adolescents think about, their attachments to things. But we do so at the loss of some of the things that remain only in our deepest nighttime dreams, when you wake up and think, "Wow, yeah, I remember," because in a dream, of course, people embody different shapes and forms and personalities from the past. And you say to yourself, "Well, I really haven't felt that level of intensity about anything for." I wonder whether heaven's like that you get back that sharp edge of sensation with things. But I don't know. And perhaps the future of humanity lies in. I always suspected it might lie in simulated worlds where the intensity of our feelings is cranked up a bit to 11 on the old dial.
What about the feeling? And here's another one for you: when you've just cleared customs and it's all good, and you're away to your hotel, and you're not. I'm not trying to discharge myself of any wrongdoings in this, but I only ever took stuff for personal use.
No, but still, you wouldn't want to be nicked with it. So
No.
When you clear the zone of death,
When I went through the airport in India, I was on my way to Thailand, and I had a blim of hash. I had one of those animal watch straps, the Velcro
yes,
ones,
yeah.
and I either would place my blim there and just put the watch strap over it, or I had Tiva sandals with the Velcro, and I'd pop it in the middle of there. And by the time you put the Velcro over and sort of crush it down a bit, it's pretty innocuous. But then, of course, what did they start doing? They started scanning the shoes, didn't they?
Oh, look, there are lots of nuisance things. I did a bit of banking once at the age of 16, and I had to wear a blonde wig. And after that, I realized that when you're wearing a full wig, you have a little gap at the back of it that can hold a couple of ounces. And generally speaking, nobody asks you to take your hair off. But with the advent of terrorism, a lot of things, you're right, you didn't expect to get your shoes taken off. Even by not long before I retired, I had to kind of rewrite the manual for people traveling around, as guidelines as to what to do with specific airports, and they do this here and there. Like there was one out of where is it, Aruba, north of Colombia. If you set off anything on the walkthrough on that airport machine, then they make you take shoes off. So for all the people doing footwear runs, had to supply them with plastic belts and make sure the zips of their pants were also non-ferrous. It made everything quite a lot more difficult like that. I was going to ask you, what's on your plate these days? Have you got? Have you done any audio recordings of your books?
No, I wanted to talk about writing with you. Probably one of my favorite subjects.
Well, yeah, I've just released the audio version of Unforgiving Destiny, and having recorded it, I was going to say this to you. You'll find if you do that, it's quite a bit of a different experience listening to the audio version. It's not just like, because it happened to you and you're the one saying it, it's not like just a actor's narration of the thing. It becomes its kind of unique form. It's something perhaps and a lot of people, that's certainly the kind of viewers I get. There might be 7,000 subscribers, but I think all but only, I don't know, 500 of them are particularly avid book readers, but a lot of them like to listen. And you probably find the people who watch your videos flick from time to time at the screen, but mostly they're listening.
Yeah.
And what we're saying now will be listened to a lot more than watched.
Let me run some practicalities by you. So first off, obviously you've got the perfect voice to narrate any book, let alone your own book.
Well, yeah, I didn't have to hire somebody, and I thought it was better coming from me.
Yeah, you're very, very measured when you speak, David, which is what you need, isn't it? You need to be consistent.
Look, that was the great hurdle, the technical one in the beginning. I had to understand it's run by a real mafia. The Amazon Audible thing, they're the only game in town, and even the big publishers have to kowtow to them. Now, their recording standards are quite narrow, must be between -18 and -24 dB.
I can sussle that on this. This isn't I've got Shure microphones, so basically the best ones.
Yeah, Shures are good. Yeah,
but also just this cheap Yeti Blue, I can hit all the levels for Audible. Once you understand how to use Audacity.
Yeah, no, it works fine. You need probably you could use the Yeti, maybe add a pop filter on it, because that does have an effect. Anyway, the timings for it, you need a half to 1 second before each chapter. The chapters can't go longer than 120 minutes. You leave 3 seconds at the end of it. there's some other minor formatting issues, like it has to be in a certain kind of mono, but all that's, you could deal with all of that. So you could produce your audio book instead of going to an outside company, providing you pad the room up with enough blankets. You can knock it out yourself rather than paying what would be about the equivalent of 11 or 12 grand to get involved with the studio.
How long did it take?
It took me a long time because when I listened to it back, and I listened to a lot of other recordings on the edit for it, I decided to take out most of the breaths between between sentences, and even in parts of sentences, except where they were part of a bit of dialogue or it was necessary for the effect, where I was surprised or I needed the intake of breath was important when something's, action and you're gasping for breath. But most of the routine ones I took out, which took a lot of time. You don't have to, but and I've also found that listeners to them often listen to them at multiplied speed, at 1.5 times, sometimes more. And if the breaths are in there, then they can stand out. There is you can use you have to do this very carefully. In Audacity, you can import from, I think they're called Nyquist filters. They're around about on the web. It's a noise gate. What it is, as it's Audacity is listening, as the level drops off, say when you've stopped speaking, and you take in a breath, that breath on the recording levels is only at about it's like minus 35 dB or something. So you can adjust the noise gate to cut out anything that's there. But I also wanted to cut it out in terms of time, not just the sound of the breath. So that was a bit of fiddling, but I don't think, I'd recommend probably against it. Don't worry about the breaths, especially with your story, which has got action in it. It's got despair, it's got highs, it's got lows. I think more personality comes through when it sounds like a living person. I was too affected by the kind of robotic examples that Amazon were giving me. And the turnaround time's a lot quicker too. It used to be months before you'd hear back from them because a human being had to listen in. Scammers, of course. They were getting robots to read out text, calling it a book, banging it up, getting a nightmare. So they had to get a human involved at least to scan through the chapters.
Did you get the Audible plugin, the checker? You can...
Yeah, I got that, and it will sometimes tell you something that you can't credit. I mean, you've made your little studio as quiet as possible. You put up a bit of foam and so on, but if the chapter's too long, you can't check the whole thing. It'll be too slow, and it won't give you much information. But you say you take a 2 or 3 minute section of it and run it through the checker, ACX checker, and it says your noise floor is too noisy. It's above the minus 60, which is their cutoff point. But it might not necessarily be the case, and so you can hear it if it's too noisy. But here's the thing: they don't want absolute silence between the parts you're speaking and not speaking, or the beginning and the end, because the machine's got to pick up that yes, a new chapter has started, or yes, a chapter is finished. So they want a little, what do they call it, room tone. In there.
There's a way you can copy and paste that, isn't there?
Well, I did that in the end because I was manipulating the taking out sections which were pretty dead, like minus 120 dB, which is virtually no sound, to make sure that at least the beginning and ending room tone was accurate. I made some room tone at minus 72 dB and cut and paste those in there so that they were always consistent. But it's worth doing. There's some, if you go ahead with it, I'll tell you some other pitfalls about it in the way they do their accounting. They let them do returns, you see. and canny subscribers will save their credits on Audible by returning a certain amount of books. They're like given 7 days to return it. And you know what? Audible is a subscription thing, so they get their money regardless of what somebody listens to or doesn't listen to. When a book gets returned, they claw the money back from you, your slice of the royalties. When it doesn't cost them anything, when it doesn't affect their subscription, they still get their money. Why should you pay? It's quite unjustified, and some people. But on the other hand, looking at my first couple of weeks' figures, I've had 1 return out of 400 sales. So,
wow!
It's, as Sean Atwood said to me, don't worry about that. It's nothing. They're you can rely on them to have worked out the algorithm, so they can. But they make sure that they don't lose their money, and it's only us, the suckers at the coalface of the entertainment industry, you could say, in its most general. I think you should take all of your catalogue and read it through.
I've been working towards doing it for so long now. I've got my podcast manager, Luke. Hello, Luke. Has come on board, and I'm gradually putting everything his way. But the training to be able to do YouTube, which we're having like 3-hour training sessions. It's funny. I have no doubt there's probably people watching now that think, oh, it's YouTube. It's just to like put your Zoom on and then chuck it up on you. Whoa.
You think of the editing time. I've looked at your edits, and they're quite complex, and they're good. Now, if I've got silly ideas myself and thought, I'll put background pictures of this, and I'll make sure my the part I'm speaking about lines up with this bit of background animation or something. It slows the whole thing. You've got to set aside a whole day to edit the thing into shape.
Yeah.
The editing programs, some of them are good, but you need a pretty powerful computer to make it run on a reasonable time length. Otherwise, you're standing at the lift waiting for the numbers to come down all the time.
Fortunately, we've got the computer, but that's the minimal thing, really. I mean, at least you can pay money and buy that thing.
Yeah. You can't buy time, and that's what none of us have enough of, I suppose.
The issue is that I get up anywhere between 5 and 6:30, so fairly early riser. And because sport or fitness is part of what I do, then I got to go for my run. I haven't got to. I love to go for my run in the morning. So I start work very early.
What time do you go to bed?
Well, this is the thing. I don't generally finish work till 9 every night. I take time off after my lad gets back from school, obviously, to spend
with him,
to eat with him, to watch some telly, to go out and kick a ball around or whatever. But I need to put that in and work till probably 9 or 10 every single night from 5 or 6 in the morning, just to make
just to get through your day properly.
Just to get YouTube sorted. I'm not saying make any money from it then, I'm saying just to get the videos up and
no, we don't make. Well, I haven't monetized mine, and I don't think there's any hope of it. But in theory, whatever else we do, whether it be books or whatever, should be producing enough income so you can keep on doing what you're doing.
Well, this is it. Luke's helping me out, and I'm gradually he's becoming a wizard at editing. He's an audio guy anyway, because he's a guitarist in the world's most popular U2 tribute band. U2.
What's it called?
U22.
U22. Oh, right. I get it. Yeah.
And he does my social media, which is another.
Well, that's nightmarish. Anyway,
I mean,
just to respond to comments and things.
Oh, it's just such a drain on resources and time. So basically, Luke's doing that. And the reason is I need to move on with my life. I need to be coaching, speaking, and doing the audiobooks and writing more books. And but it's catch-22. If you're not a millionaire, you can't pay people millions of pounds to do all this stuff for you. You have to work with what you've got.
Not only that, and I've often asked Sean, how do you manage to knock out another book every 9 months or year and a half or something? I just don't seem to be able to wedge that time in. Yeah, I dictate it. So wherever I am, I go straight on my phone recording thing and gets typed up. And then
I've no idea how he manages to do.
He's lost his girlfriend now. I mean, he's got no social life. Well, that was pretty good, no? I plan to ask Chris and another former soldier who is also a friend to join me in a discussion on what kind of soldier might we see in the 22nd century, the future of soldiering, or even in 10 years in a world that simply never goes to war, where the big, rich countries can't possibly allow their armies to fight because between Facebook and YouTube newsflash bites, whoever ordered that war will be out on his ass come election time. What will the future soldier be? Captain America, Iron Man, or the silent assassin? Yeah, that's something I'm cooking up. It'll be kind of a Skype all-rounder. See you next time.